pass off as being intelligent. You know, so be busy at a desk or something and suddenly look up. Oh! Oh. How would you like to lose 50 pounds? Oh, I'm sorry. They forgot they changed professions. They said, how would you like to vote for me? And of course, I guess come their sensei. Wait, how would you like to vote for me and lose 50 pounds? Wait a minute. We may be on to something. Who wants to run for office? That's it. We'll guarantee that everybody that votes for you will lose. Well, let's be real. Just guarantee the public that anyone who votes for you will lose by the time they vote between that and when you take office, which one? 4 or 5 weeks, that they will just with no effort lose 12 pounds, let's say that. Oh, are we on? Oh, all right. All right, inasmuch as I know that some of you now have your own glimpse of the possibility that we mentioned of words having their own life, is it not about time, now we've had a week or so, that you could consider a similar possibility of the kind of special equality, like in words, between the speaker and the hearer, and in the words, the possibility of them being alive, of a similar situation regarding emotions. Now you might start off and think that again it would be obvious that in the area of emotions that we'd be dealing with two primary players in the emotional dance. Or put another way, with emotions is one person sending emotions and another person the recipient of the emotion. And as we were discussing earlier, how it is that under certain conditions, and when you get good, under damn near every condition, that words seem to be almost irrepressible little boogers. That actually pales, though, within the chomping at the bit of emotions. Because there are people, under certain conditions, quite ordinary people, that can hold their tongue. Such as a friend of the man I mentioned earlier, that one word killed him, if you recall, the guy that was in the wrong closet at the wrong time holding his clothes and coughed. He had a near relative that learned a lesson, and he became the sort of man that could be under adverse conditions and hold his tongue. Such as be in front of a heavily armed band of men with strange masks, and if they say, do you think we look funny? Many people can hold their tongue and go, and not say what they want to say. But when you move past the area of words, which is a danger, but we'll do it verbally, and get into what would seem to be emotions, it takes more than that kind of apparent ordinary energy and ordinary conditions under which some people can refrain from spilling their verbal guts. It takes more unusual circumstances for people to be able to withhold any sort of transmission of a real bubbling emotion, such as these bandits, these out-of-state desperados can look around and look at you and say, do you think we look funny? And let's assume that you think they not only look funny, they look dangerously funny. But you might be able to go, Now, if you don't like the way we look or the way we're handling things right here, just say so. Yeah, you. And you might go. But let us assume, for the sake of my example, that you are extremely upset by this. That they have not only come in to your town from out of town, but are littering. They may have beaten several good friends of yours about the head and hit them in the kidneys. They may have requisitioned your car, and they may be over there painting it purple out of spray cans from Kmart. All in all, let's say that you are somewhat peeved, upset. Perhaps, to be a good human, even undergoing omni, or various directional emotions, all the way from fear to anger to the good old time peeviness. And yet there they are loaded for bear. Of course, your name doesn't even have to be Max, but they could look at you and say, if you don't like this, say so. And you might not say anything. But you do know, surely, where this is going. There is a quiet, expected, to take the background I have just conjured up, a quiet, valid expectation that you, if they say, do you have anything to say? Just say the word if you don't like the way we're operating. Just say so. And they all cock their guns. And that you, in your wisdom, in your inner strength, can refrain from saying anything. But it would be quite expected that the emotions you're feeling would still be obvious even to outer-towners with less than a college education. Do you know what I mean? That they may say, look, if you're upset by this, you just say so. Just say the word. Just say upset. Just say upset. Go ahead and say it if you're upset. And you might have the wherewithal not to open your mouth and go. All of that being that in a relative scheme of things, which is the scheme of things, and a way to talk about ordinary activities at the city level, you simply should be aware that taking the division that seems to be operational, that seems to be necessary for ordinary humans to talk about the ordinary human condition, that the activities of the mind, if they could be singularly described and discussed, that we're just calling words. Words with sans emotion, just words. That would be one operation of the human psyche, the human organism, and emotions would be another. Taking that kind of relative view, for which there is some validity for those of limited eyesight, you simply must see that it is harder, under any ordinary conditions, to hold back emotions than it is words. That should not come as any shock, and maybe somebody will think, well, Jesus, it took 6 minutes, and that was the point. Well, but would it? For those of you that thought earlier that the idea of words perhaps having their own life, truly, as I suggested to you, not just metaphorically, for those of you that thought and agreed that that might explain a lot, hold on to your trust when you consider that same sort of possibility of emotions, because it is quite well stated and recorded throughout human history that certain efforts can be made and a person refrain from verbally saying that which may prove to be unprofitable to the individual's best interest. Or a large group of people could perhaps be hiding in the bushes about to attack one of their neighbors, and assuming the leader, assuming then it was not General Custer, might tell them all, shh. If they hear us here now, we're ill prepared and we will be slaughtered. Shh. And you might have, on the institutional scale, hundreds, thousands of people all go and not say a word. But can they stop their feelings? Can they suppress the feelings? I guess perhaps for some of you I took too big of a leap there. The feelings can still be transmitted, and they can be transmitted without words, although if I get around to it, I wanted you to, in a more complex way, to see that there is a certain kind of unprofitable, quote, danger in separating words, even when you're considering it, and emotions. They should be a hyphenated word or consider it wordy emotions, because what you're dealing with, that I certainly didn't plan to hit on, but you're dealing with the humans in this day and time almost everywhere on this planet with creatures that have what now amounts to primary and secondary emotions, in the same kind of sense that I have used that term before in other areas. It is unprofitable, ultimately, to think of human emotions, now not the kind of emotions that we could say, again, with some validity, at least for the sake of discussion, not the kinds of emotion, sensation, that we obviously share with other non-human cerebral creatures. That is a kind of silent, let's call it sensation for a second, as opposed to ordinary emotion. It's the kind of emotion that is just simply animalistic. It is the kind of emotion that I would be referring to at some future time as a primary emotion. It is in direct, non-ambiguous defense of the primary health, the primary growth, the primary existence of the creature, of the human. It would simply be you fighting for your life. You fighting perhaps to defend your family, which is fighting for your genetic life. Or you fighting over food at that time, which could be the matter of your life, that you had to eat right then and somebody else comes up and attacks, which would not be the same that if you got in a fight that you were sitting in a restaurant, dining, not eating, and someone looked over at your meal and says, how gauche that anyone would still order that kind of so-called nouveau California cuisine, which is now passé up your surfboard. And let us say that being the sophisticated, intellectual person you are, you took a certain amount of umbrage and went, you talking to me? So if you got in a fight then, it would not be over what I would be calling primary emotion, you understand, or primary sensation. When you get that level, you cannot separate words and emotion. But keep that, I guess we'll hit that shortly next time we tape, since I brought it up. Where I was, if you didn't lose your place, was trying to get you to consider that not only the possibility, the distinct possibility of life providing words as living creatures, beings, entities. Don't get locked up on any particular word. That's why I kept shifting them the first night we mentioned this. Because, and my hint is it's more than metaphorical. It's obvious that words have energy. People for thousands of years have been pointing out that words have the power to move men's souls, to make men cry, to make men fight. The law recognizes it. They do not recognize it past a certain point, though. The point being, I was suggesting to you that those little suckers might be. See, there's another one. We've got suckers, beings, entities, things, stuff, that they might be alive on their own. It is not that hard to begin to get a glimpse of it, to consider the kind of ordinary relationship, the kind of ordinary dance. For talk to take place, there has got to be a receiver and a sender. There's got to be a talker and a listener, even if, parenthetically, or brachytechnically, if it happened within inside of your own brain. But there's got to be one person to talk and one person to listen for the dance to happen. But there is always, like the spirit guest, that no one identifies. It is part of the limitations of three-dimensional consciousness and a three-dimensional existence. But it is not that hard to begin to strongly suspect something beyond that kind of metaphorical, no matter how intelligent it may seem, to say that words do have certain powers, that you can say certain insults to certain people, and by God they will fight. And the law even recognizes in many parts of the world fighting words, as we've mentioned, that they take up for the kind of electrical wiring in certain groups of people and say, well, we have free speech, let us say, in this country, and you are theoretically granted to say anything you want to. You got to suffer the consequences, maybe. But there are certain words that you shouldn't even say to start with, because under certain conditions, they're known in case law, in the American and Anglo-Saxon judicial system, as fighting words, that you just shouldn't say them. Don't say them, because if you turn to a short green person and there's some kind of insult, a short green person of the X religion, and you say, well, you little X greenie, or wherever it is, that it's known, and even if we, a judge, a philosopher, even if we are not short and green and of the X persuasion, we can understand that as such of a pejorative insult that the people just automatically just lash out. And so don't do it. That's just not covered by free speech. Do not do that. So there's all of that kind of spectrum saying that words in some way have power, and that words, the sonnets of Shakespeare, or on a bad night, I guess, read Browning. And that people can sit around and tears come to their eyes from words. They say all that, and it sounds poetically impressive. It even sounds at times philosophically insightful. But notice it just stops there. And you could be, at city level, that intellectually sophisticated to agree that their beautiful literature, the beautiful use of the human language, is something that truly can not only cause hostility amongst people, but it can cause a grown, strong person like myself to fall down and cry. Or it can make me have such great dreams about the possibilities, the hope of humanity, or of me. And that just sounds, and at city level, I guess it is a decent hobby. It's better than going out and holding up your neighborhood 7-Eleven. But notice it just stops there. No one has ever considered the possibility that I hinted to you, that the reason for this, one possibility, just theoretically, for those of you really taking a long time this week, you have just got to theoretically agree that that's almost a science fiction, I guess, curio possibility, that if words actually, and let's still don't call them real creatures, just call them anything you want to, but that this power, instead of it being nebulous, instead of it being poetic, instead of it being spiritual, the power could easily be explained if the words themselves are on an equal footing, if they are part of a triaxial dance between a speaker and a listener, and that the words are as much a part of the conversation, that is the talk, that the words are absolutely as much a part of it as whoever said it and whoever hears it and reacts to it. Of course, those sorts of things, a real aside again, are always safe, because you could say that to an ordinary person and they would believe that they almost heard what you said. And if you said, what if it was more than metaphorical? And they'd go, huh, yeah, I know what you mean. That would be funny. And if you said, no, what if it's really more than metaphorical? I mean, just think for a second, instead of calling it metaphorical, what if it was true? Let's just pretend. What if it was true? Then that would change everything that people have speculated, all the questions people have about intercourse amongst civilized men and women, about how talk has and words have certain power. Wouldn't it? And they'd go, about like you people just did, you go, almost no reaction. And yet if you get a glimpse of it, it's just one of those things again, as all things are one of those things, that I'm suggesting to you, if you see it from your own particular view somewhere outside the city, it's just, I'm not saying yet, if I ever am, but if that were true, and you can see that it could be true, which is the point, past the point that the ordinary intellect can even do that. It could say, yeah, I hear that it could be metaphorically true, and if you said, no, wait, just pretend it's more than metaphorically true. Would you do that for me? And the ordinary person would go, all right. And they'd go, ooh, but they wouldn't. Oh, I guess we could beat them, and they'd say, well, I did, I tried. But I'm telling you, and check for yourself. They wouldn't. And if you don't like that, all right. For those of you out of town, they could not. But that's a childish explanation. The real one is they wouldn't. You could say, just for a second, we know it's not true. And you do hear that it makes an interesting metaphorical possibility. They go, yeah, it does. Just for me, just between me and you, we're here alone. Just pretend just a second. Just try and think and pretend that it was not a metaphor, that it was an actual material fact. Would you do that? Well, sure, I can do that. All right, do it. And they go, ugh! And they wouldn't. Oh, they may say they did, but they wouldn't. That's why all this stuff's safe. Still back to where we were. There's enough of you that's got that kind of glimpse in the last few nights that I was asking you now. You can take this almost as it stands, move it, shift it inside the nervous system, and apply it to emotions. And if you're good, you can even apply it thicker. You can load up your little trowel. You can spread it on. You can almost throw it against the wall. I mean, if you felt as though you were having to sort of keep it neat and keep a tarp down on the carpet and try to watch yourself dealing with this regarding words, you get into emotions and you can forget all that. You can just pick it up in your hands. You can take whole buckets and just throw it against the wall wherever it flies. Throw it toward the ceiling. And it's not going to fall on anything that will be harmed. It will not spot. It will not soil. In other words, it will not fly and hit anything that it did not need to hit. So therefore, you're never going to say, well, wait a minute, somebody came into my red room here and they threw a gallon of white paint, or perhaps a pint, but they just slung white paint and it got all over my red chair, my red carpet. You apply this to emotions, and no matter where you sling it, you cannot go back over and say, well, that shouldn't have hit that. You can't even see that, well, it hit something that it doesn't match. If you could begin to see, and try to see, the possibility of emotions in the same way being their own separate, alive, sentient being, creature, thing, you would then have a more complex view of ordinary life thusly, rather than seeing it as a matter of humans feeling emotion. It would be better described as emotions feeling themselves. God Almighty, Hubert, wouldn't that explain 2 or 3 other things that have been bothering me for a couple of decades now? What if it were, whatever, again, emotions we can call them right now, creatures, beings, separate entities, rather than humans feeling the emotion, whatever it is. If it were more a matter of the emotion feeling itself, you're then faced with a pleasant new vista of seeing emotions having their own existence and man being their medium. For those of you closer to the Denver address, men merely as their medium. Well, you can surely, to back up and run sideways and then obliquely, you can surely quite clearly see a man giving birth, breath, voltage, audio amplification to words. Well, he's got to. Who's going to say words on this planet if men do not? That's right. No one. That from a quite valid and simple starting view, words would not exist in any way that you would know about it, did not men give apparent birth, voice to, amplify, transmit, they would not exist. If they would not exist in any form that you'd be aware of, you would have never heard a word. Could you try and parallel all sideways that to emotions and consider that men could be like the blood circulatory heater for emotions? Almost as though they were operating as the emotions nervous system generator. Okay, I'll give it to you simply. Emotions, human emotions, could not exist without man in the same way that words couldn't. Where would you find them? You could not find words. You would have never heard a word in your life had not men been the medium for our words. Had it not been that men apparently, visibly, are the origins of words. They are the transmitter of words. They have to amplify the words. They have to put the physical spin on the words to move within the audio spectrum. Men, words you will not find laying around somewhere. If men had never spoken, I suggest you would have never still stumbled if we had such as silent anthropology. that somebody somewhere finally would have turned over a rock or been digging down in the Grand Canyon and suddenly come upon inchoate, unused, never expressed. They would, of course, know what they were, but words. Fossils of things stillborn. Words, nobody would know about words had it not been for man to apparently give them birth. How much more so, with a slightly different twist, would it be with emotion? To take the simple picture I just did, again, I assume that you would accept the fact, speaking about human emotions, not the kind that would be closer to the primary common sensations that you might share with a dog and a tiger, but the kinds of emotions that are uniquely human, just by anybody's definition. Would you expect, ridiculously asked, that you would go out if humans were not acting as transmitters, amplifiers, voltage regulators of emotion? Do you think that they would still be existing somewhere and that you would find them, that we would discover them laying under a bush, hidden under some rubble somewhere, spewed up by a volcanic action? Could you have human emotions without humans? So if emotions actually were alive, if they had their own agenda, which they would have if there would be some genetic agenda there, or they would not exist any more than you and I and everyone else, and tigers and lions and rhinos would exist. They would have to have their own genetic agenda. And I was going to ask, could you take what we were mentioning last time we were taping, the fact that although change obviously requires effort and energy, that new rule of physics that we mentioned, that it takes everyone's total energy, all the energy that everyone has to keep things as they are, to keep things unchanged. Could you see any possible connection between that and this other strange scene of emotions actually having their own separate, living existence with their own genetic agenda? And see that all of these areas that I mentioned as examples of people continually, daily criticizing, being disagreeable, finding fault, rethinking the same thoughts, refeeling the same feel, that even once you begin to see that, then this kind of repetitive living would no longer, I suggest to you, or I submit to you, would no longer look quite as strange if the thoughts, if the feelings themselves were alive with their own agenda and you were simply the medium. Those of you getting real good, this great question of does man have free will or not, which I will point out to you again, everybody deals with that's never even heard it and never had a philosophical thought in their life. It is the basis of all acceptance of responsibility and or the shifting. It is the basis of all forms of criticism. That is, it is at the very critical heart of man transforming and transferring energy. Because if men were in agreement, if men did not find one another's activities, one another's institutions, one another's thoughts and feelings to be everywhere from partially to totally flawed, disreputable, and dangerous, we would not be alive. And so you're dealing with the matter continually of, does man have free will or not? Do I have free will or not? Do I have it all the time? Do other people have it? How can we explain that we're at such diverse positions if words, if emotions were as much a living, separate entity as you and the next person? If that were true, then they would have at least as much as you, their own genetic scheme. There'd be a paradigm, an agenda. There would be a purpose for them being there in this dance with you. If that were true, can you not see that the idea then of, well, sometimes I feel like I'm not really responsible. Sometimes I don't want to be responsible. Sometimes, damn it, I just felt like I couldn't have done otherwise, looking back on it. But I believe he could. Well, I don't know. But then the way she acted, I've been in that position before. I know sometimes it's like the circumstances. All of that would become the big M. The big moot. And all questions would be answered. Of course, except about the one shoe in the road. That if words, emotions, wordy emotions, secondary emotions, if they had their own genetic, separate existence with their own paradigm, then all of these questions as to do I have free will, or why do I sometimes feel like I can do something, sometimes I feel like I can't, all of that is, goodbye Alfredo. There's nothing else to say. Well, of course there's something else to say, but there's nothing else to say about that. And all the feelings that sometimes things are out of my control, or sometimes I have feelings that I just can't repress, and I'll just out and say them, and sometimes it does me no good at all. Sometimes I put my little foot in things. Oh, the many times I look back and wish that I could pull back what was said yesterday. The times I let my feelings show. It cost me money, jobs, sales, lovers. If I could just call back yesterday. And that's almost the basis of poetry. It's almost the basis of history. It's almost the basis of city life. Unless you realize, who are you going to call back? They believe, well, I'd call back my behavior. I see. In other words, you would call back the words you said, yes. And in some instances, the emotions that you express, that you kind of send out to others. Yes. But it can't be done, can it? It doesn't seem possible. And it really seems to give man's soul the RA. It seems to annoy men's soul. It seems to have a negative, poetic impact upon man's psyche. Right. In other words, you would probably have very little literature in the city were it not for that, yes. No religion, yeah, I guess so. Damn little music, yeah. Probably no good restaurants. Yeah, that's probably true. To see it as the big moot would be another way that's right this close to you once you understand that the surface of things is much deeper than the surface seems, and there's a variation of that also, which is that the surface is exactly as it appears. So take your choices according to which eyes you're using. But if you could begin to see this, then the possibility is so close to what seems to be areas of guilt, what seems to be areas that plague men of, if I could only, if I had not, if I could call back yesterday, if I could only bring back my dear sainted mother and tell her I'm sorry. If I could only move back 2 weeks ago before greed made me invest my money in that owl farm. What seems to be, with no sarcasm involved, what seems to be a fair description of the song of life. I guess they might want to start and say, well, it's sort of like a certain Oriental dinners. It's sugar, or it's sweet and it's sour. It's up and down. But if I say, well, wait a minute, I didn't ask you for 2 songs. If there's one song for life, what is it with most people? What could we come up with? After some discussion, I suggest I could get most city people, even the most well-educated, most sophisticated, to say, all right, at the very least, it might be close to a song. God knows why I know who wrote it, Saul Lake. The Bittersweet Samba. Is that not just a fair description, a fair representation for the song of life? Let's don't go as far as say that the song of life would be, down the toilets with us all, or life sucks. Let's bring it up a little bit. But would it not be perhaps the bittersweet samba? I suggest to you I'd get most everybody under right conditions, from presidents to prime ministers to popes and rabbis, poets, to go, yeah, that's true. No great sadness. I'm not trying to give them the blues. But wouldn't all of you great people kind of admit that it's sort of a bittersweet song? That's our 60 or 70 years here. And they'd go, yeah. If you could see that the bittersweet samba, the complete dance of life, at every instance, and at all instances put together, to put together 72 years for you, where it seems to be individual between you and one other person, you and whole groups of people like your family, you and whole other institutions, or your institution compared to other people's institution, that all of these dances, all these performances, all of these relationships has a missing, unseen partner sitting there at the dinner, to change metaphors in the middle of the courses. On the dance floor, there is another person dancing with you and everybody else you've ever danced with. I mean, it's just as clear as hell once you see it. It's been you and your lovers dancing, you and your mother, you and your father, you and your religion, you and your culture, you and your nation. And I mean, it's just clear as hell. But it's also clear as hell when you get away from it, when you can see from a new place in the intellect, not only you and the person just dancing, just as close as you can, smiling, or just as close as you can in each other's face and growling and slobbering. And all the time, you never saw it, there was a third. There was this ghostly presence. There's been another person always there, another entity, another factor. And when you get to the secondary level, when you get to the area unique with man on this planet, in the 3D world, you're talking about words. Nobody even comes close, no other creature, and it does not count. I don't care if you do own an owl farm. They all say who, so don't tell me that they could have been 1/4 of a reporter. They still can't say when, where, and the rest of it. No one talks on this planet. No one deals with words. What else? No one deals with human emotion. Animals have passion. They have passions not unlike the kinds of passions that would protect and serve you and everyone else well at the primary level of defending yourself, your life, perhaps your genetic kin, your food, your place of residence, your cave, to get you out of the elements that could prove unsustaining to life. But when it gets to any other area, the very things that make man, by some poetic definitions, unique, all of the human characteristics, the outpourings, the manifestations of the human spirit, art, literature, love, compassion, charity, blah, blah, blah. You got two things that no one comes close. You do have a few characters I used to like to, and the more red-circuited people talk about. But raccoons can open a drawer. Raccoons can unzip their jackets if they had one. It's words and human emotions. Without them, you would not have the city. You would not have life as we know it. It wouldn't even be close. We might as well be raccoons. All of the questions that men seem to have, all the things that they say plague their souls, all the things they say they won't answer, all the things that they say are a specific annoyance, all the things that they say are wrong with life, are in those two areas. Nowhere else. If you get into areas outside that, let's take a great example. Eruption of volcanoes. It's happening right now again. It's always happening somewhere in the world, but right now it's the one in Hawaii again is tearing down, burning up people's homes, several a day, running people out. It's killed people. But you should know this. Or, if that seems too far removed, a storm comes through where you live. A terrible storm, blows over trees, wrecks part of your house. There is no semblance of feeling that you have toward that occurrence than there is over a mechanic charging you for a water pump, and later you find out he did not put in a water pump. There is no comparison. It's not even at the same level. It is not even the same emotion. It's not in the same family of emotions. That's why people do not go into that kind of human shock, that kind of human outrage. They do not have that kind, they do not experience what it seems to be that kind of human emotion over so-called natural tragedies. They do not. You have to dwell on that. Surely all of you know that. Maybe not everybody's been through a hurricane or a tornado, but surely you hear what I'm saying. There is not that kind of emotion. You should be able to feel it if you got any possibility of pressing on. That if indeed a hurricane came through here right now, while we're here, and did some of us terrible harm, or let's say we all owned a piece of this building, or it was your building, and it just flattened it out, and your insurance wouldn't cover it, and it killed maybe some of the people here, your close friends. No doubt you'd feel bad. No doubt you'd feel sad, and etc. We got to call it something since we're talking with human words. But you do know, you surely feel, that is not even in the same universe. It's not in the same place in your nervous system as the kind of emotion you would feel if somebody came in here and sold you a gold brick. It's not the same. The second one is based upon secondary activities. It is uniquely human, whereas the first one, what you would feel about weathering a terrible natural calamity, if you could take away what you thought about it, then your kinds of feelings would not be that far removed from the way a dog feels in terrible weather, or a bear. It's a different thing. So we're talking about emotions, I'm just using what ordinary people call it, emotions that are without any doubt, I'm not twisting it, you just surely can feel it, emotions that are singular to man, words, that is, human language that is singular to man, neither one would exist by themselves. Words do not just lay around. Emotions do not grow out of the ground. Were it not for man, shall we say, expressing them? We wouldn't say acting as their medium, since I already said it, would I? All right, let's say it and just see what happens. But all of the questions, all of the problems, not the problems of hurricanes, water spouts, tornadoes, earthquakes, tidal waves. Men do not consider those problems. Not the same as somebody's going to cheat you. Not the same as, how come every woman I meet always ends up and mistreats me and leaves me and always takes my credit card? Why is it that every time you trust somebody, blah, blah, blah? People are not concerned about non-human emotions. I know that people may try to build a building that will withstand an earthquake if they're living in San Francisco, and etc. But they do not have the concern. That is not a life problem, in the same way that it's a problem that your mind is driving you crazy, or that you do not have a close emotional relationship with any other human, that you may be going nutso, or that you may never find true love, or that you may never find what you're suited for in life. Those areas, I guess I gave you every chance to lose your place. It is those unique areas that I'm trying to get you to see again would quit being unique areas, much less problems of any kind, if it were a fact that those two unique operations of man, talk and human emotions, that what seems to be their currency, the lingua franca of being intellectual and being human emotionally, if the currency had a life of its own, if words were actual as much deserving, as much real living entities as you are, and then if human emotions were the same, do you realize how that would wreck the hobby business in the city? And of course by hobby business I mean being ordinarily human. What would seem to be all of the problems, all of the disputes, all of the turmoil, all of the, if there's such a thing as an emotional dictionary listed somewhere, go get it, and I'll go ahead and put my reputation on the line. You won't find an exception. Everything listed in there would become of no consequence to you if it were a fact that the emotions, and of course notice the only way that they could be an emotional dictionary was they have taken the emotions and given each one of them a name and put it in there. Wordy emotions. Then all of those, if you understood, well, wait a minute, I'm not looking here at a listing of words. I am looking at a genealogy. I'm looking at another family tree. It's just a different species. I never recognized words and human emotions are their own species. We coincide, like I get along with dogs. Sometimes I feed pigeons. I've even spent several hours without any fisticuffs one time with an Episcopalian. It's like different species in some way can coexist. And I didn't realize, but we had an invisible, an unrecognized species or two, words and human emotions, that have been living here amongst us. You know, forget the Night of the Living Dead or whatever those, that old classic science fiction, that the people that came down and took over human bodies, and the movie they used to advertise that something on the basis they're here among us and no one knows it. You know, because they took on human forms, and so the word got out that they're here and they're going to do us no good. But how will we find them? Because they look like everybody else. And the guy sitting here said, "You're right, I heard about it. Let's be concerned." And then the voiceover says, "But you don't know him. He might be one of them." And the guy said, "Yes, let's go out and find them now and do away with them." Who can you trust? And what if you saw, forget all that of course, that there has been a whole race, another species or two, words and human emotions, living right here amongst us, but not passing themselves off as something, not you not recognizing them. It's not you being aware of the fact that they were their own species. Now, words is something I do. That is, talk is something that I do. Emotions is something I feel. If you've got any possibility of a different kind of intelligence, if we could suddenly take on a view, if, just for a theoretical second, if words or emotions were their own separate living beings, let's suddenly now try and take their view. You could not see that humans are something that emotions do, use, that words are something that's just part of words' necessary existence. Come on, that's not hard. All right, look at it this way. Could you live without words? And life as you know it now. The answer is no. All right. Now try right quick. Let's just play science fiction. Just imagine, real hard, that let's imagine now that words do exist. And they live here amongst us, kind of in a different dimension. They're invisible. I ain't got time for all this. They're invisible. How about that? But they're here. All right, now let's imagine and that there's some kind of real beings themselves alive. Each little word is like another person, sort of. All right, now imagine you're a word. And we were words talking. And I could be saying, look, I know it sounds strange sometimes when I talk about men and humanity, but look at it this way. You're still words and I'm a word. And I'm saying, could we exist? Could we live as we know it now without men? And you'd go, huh. It'd strike you, no, we couldn't. You know, maybe you don't realize the full significance, but you'd have to say, you got me. Well, I thought that would help. Well, I was going to give, since the way in which we tape these, if anybody ever sees these, they survived the big war and the bomb and the return of Richard Nixon. Everybody, I was going, anyway, we tape, this is the end of the week, the way we figure things here on this planet. I was going to give a little, my present for this week. That, if you can see it as a kind of masterful, revolutionary maneuver, and it comes to mind since we're talking about the same general area this week. It's a kind of way to cheat and get extra energy. You can gain energy. And it's fairly simple to describe, but I suggest it is masterful. As you accept all criticism, all hostility, all censure, all ill looks. F-R-E-E-L-Y. You offer no opposition, none. You do not play lamb to anybody's lion. You do not play lion to anyone's lamb. Anything I say from here on out for the rest of the tape after this is superfluous. Mm-hmm. You offer no opposition. Enough of you know about this already, but it's easy to forget. But it is a continual. It is like receiving a 1,000,000-volt dose of Snickers-laced, amphetamine-based pasta. Did that about cover it? Maybe with some Gatorade. You have got all of the electrical, proteinural, carbohydrate. You have got all possible forms of energy in one dose, and it's always available. To accept it, F-R-E-E-L-Y. Freely. When I say no opposition, you don't even think about. You can't dwell on. You don't analyze. You just smile and you eat it. That's why I was drawing up the picturization of Snickers-laced, amphetamine-based pasta. Is whatever seems to be the form of criticism, any kind of negative emotions. Even if they were silent, that's why I threw in looks. Is you have got to freely smile and eat it. And if you do, it's free energy. But you can't deal with any, not any opposition. And if you think about what's going on, it's opposition. If you analyze, if you try and justify, if you do anything, if you say, well, I probably deserved it, then you're expending all the energy you've got to keep things just as they are. But to take all forms of criticism, censure, just a slightly disagreeable look, the transfer of any wordy emotions, smile and eat it. And once you learn how, it is more than helpful, healthy, and beneficial. It's a lot better than that. All right, I'll go ahead and say it. It's fun. It is fun. And again, I guess some of you can put it together out in ordinary life, throughout history and religions and philosophies. This thing's been floating for years. It's the basis. If you want to look at it a certain way, it is the city foundation, the institutional basis of every religion. They're right at the heart of it. Of don't return anger. Love your fellow man. Love your neighbors yourself. That's based on the assumption that you would love yourself in such a way that you would not be critical or censor yourself. That don't return anger. Don't fight back. Don't hate people who hate you. It's been here for thousands of years, and people go, yeah. And life is still wired up and primed through man that it makes many, almost everybody go, yeah, that's true. Oh, that's true. Boy, that's heavy shit stuff. Sorry. See, sometimes I do that just for you people on tape. All right, I won't. There is a physical, an electrical, a chemical basis for it. But you can't study your way out of it. You cannot chant your way out. You can't light candles. You cannot join up a religion and sign your name in blood. Let them cut off little pieces of extremely sensitive and important parts of your body if you're a man. There's nothing you can do that suddenly makes this become a fait accompli. In other words, no one can do it. You should know that by now. Because as long as you will deal with it on the secondary level, that is, you'll talk about it at all, that is to yourself. If somebody goes by you and looks at you and says, aren't you one of those followers of the Green X religion? And you go, and they look at you like you're something that people step on in the barnyard. And you may then start talking to yourself, well, wait a minute. Our great teacher, the gods themselves told us that we would be persecuted, that people could be negative. They can't help it. I won't react to it. What the hell do you think that is? That's what I mean. You have got to freely accept it. You have got to smile and eat it. But it's got to be a real, remember, the real pretense is the pretense. That is reality. That is manhandling reality. When I say smile and eat it, since I've said it 4 or 5 times, start off that it is the pretense, if you've got to. Those of you who can do it, it shouldn't take you over a millisecond that you go, and then you realize, and then it turns into, because the reality is faking it. That is the pretense, You have got to smile and you eat it. But to eat it, you can't oppose it. That is, you can't think about it in any manner, pro or con, or God bless them, God forgive them, God damn them. That's not freely. You're opposing it. I don't care if you say, well, it's good for me. You could be a follower of some philosophy that says, when people mistreat you, boy, it's good for you because you can learn from it, and it shows that at least the cosmic force is interested in you, or they wouldn't pick on you. It can be that, so that somebody says, you're one of those people, one of those followers, Jesus, and look at you like you're nothing, and you go, that's good for me. It's gone. You're using all the energy you've got. You're opposing it. You got to smile and eat it. And of course, surely I don't have to remind you not to even try. Don't ever let yourself return anything, any sort of criticism or censure about the people. That is, don't you think about not just what they said or did, but about them. That is, shame on them. All right, I'll use good neighborhood street terminology through, as I'm going to tell you, when it comes to opposing all forms of hostility, censorship, ill looks, ill words, you shouldn't ever take the first drink, the first snort. Just don't. The electrical power of words and energy, of words and emotions, wordy emotions, the energy, the power is such that if you consider them, if you can begin to see them having an existence of their own, even the possibility, then I'm going to tell you the power of them are such that everyone's a potential alcoholic and addict. So don't take the first drink. You just smile and eat the invitation. Here, would you have a drink? Would you have a snort and be mad? Understand I don't like you. You smile and eat it. You don't take the drink. The metaphors are running out just as the tape did. You smile and eat it. You take it freely. You cannot think about it at all. So, till we meet again, think about that.